Good morning from Easier Habits Live, your 8 a.m. Central Business live stream. I'm Alec. Meg is not here this morning since it is spring break for our kids, and just after the time change, I thought I'd let her sleep in. And I wanted to talk today a little bit about why habits fail, because a lot of what I do with people and companies is installing habits. If I'm doing executive coaching or coaching for leaders, individual people, I do focus a lot on their personal habits and routines, breaking down challenges into small chunks that they can try out different solutions each week, and we iterate until we find something that consistently works. And with teams, it's a process of creating systems. It's a little bit more complicated in the sense of that you're thinking about how to hire for people with certain values, how to train those values, how to evaluate them, etc. But it still boils down to trying to find systems of regular action and systems that make things easier and systems that get consistent results. So that is what I focus on. But there are a lot of reasons why habits fail. And a lot of times what people do is, you try and set a habit, whether it's a personal habit like exercise, or whether you're trying to do a more strict agile process as a team. And when you're not able to follow through, you think, oh, I just didn't have the discipline to do it. And that's the problem. And we just got to make the commitment to do it again next week. Lo and behold, you do it next week. Same thing happens. You don't do it, or you don't quite do it, and you try and just muscle through with more discipline. And I don't think that discipline is typically the answer. So, what do you do when a habit fails? And how do you? It depends. So, what do you do when a habit fails? Well, it depends on why it fails, and so I'm going to walk you through some different scenarios. One reason why a habit fails is like last week with Meg and the health challenge. There's just an unexpected obstacle. So Meg had a crazy migraine that interrupted her in the middle of the challenge, and it was probably brought on by exercising too much too quickly and some of Meg's chronic conditions. And so the reason why that habit didn't go through is just because we didn't plan for that obstacle. And what do you do in this case? You adapt. What will you do if that obstacle happens again? And particularly, if it's something that might be repeated. And so with Meg and me, that just looked like, asking her what she thinks caused the migraine or what contributed to that, and trying to figure out a way that she can do exercise regularly without overdoing it. And she kind of has to figure that out on her own. Since then, she hasn't had the same problems. That's an example. But it could be, for example, that you resolve to do a habit at a particular time, but there are a lot of interruptions at that time. So maybe what you need to do is move it to a different time, etc. Or maybe you have some kind of cue to start your habit, or you forget to have a cue to start your habit, and so you just miss the time to do a habit completely. And that way you need a better cue, you set an alarm on your phone, etc. But basically, if the habit was interrupted by something else that you hadn't planned for, you adjust your plans and try it again next week and see what happens. So what happens though if there were no other interruptions and you didn't follow through on the habit? Well, there's a couple of other things. One, sometimes you just chose something too big. So you have not been doing a habit all, and you set a goal to do it for, if you haven't been exercising at all, you set a goal to do it for 30 minutes, right? And you set a goal to do it for 30 minutes right when you wake up. And when you wake up, your motivation is low, you're still groggy, and you're like, oh, I can't do 30 minutes today, maybe tomorrow, right? That's an example of maybe if you just said 5 minutes, all right? So like all I need to do is get up and walk around outside for 5 minutes, or, do, or 1 minute, right? Get out of bed, do push-ups for 1 minute, and that's it. That is much more approachable. So that kind of approach of breaking it down can help you fight the inertia, the putting off, right, of a particular habit. And I find that if you break it down small enough, then you need a tiny amount of discipline, but you don't need a lot of discipline, and you can build some consistency. But what happens if you break it down small enough that you're able to do it, it doesn't take a lot of discipline, and you do it for a little while and it drops off? What is the problem there? The problem there is usually that you're not seeing results. So that's problem 3, is that there's just no positive feedback for the habit. Now you can create some sort of like artificial feedback, like a reward. After I do this, I do X. Like after I work out, I take a nice warm shower or something. And that's not necessarily bad, but it doesn't build your native motivation to do the habit, and will still probably falter long term. One of the things you need from a habit is a habit that gets you some kind of tangible result. If you don't get anything out of your habit, your brain will try to stop you from doing that habit because your brain wants to conserve energy. Your brain is a very efficient machine. It doesn't want you to keep doing something that takes a lot of effort and gives you no result. So, for example, one of the things that you could do in this case is switch out habits. Test a range of different habits to get for the results you're looking for, and see what gives you the best results. This is what I encourage people to do mostly, like your number one toolbox here. So if you have a goal to exercise and get in shape, and jogging isn't doing it for you, try something else. In fact, jogging is great for a number of things, but for like losing body fat, for example, or building muscle, right? You're not gonna get the biggest bang for your buck out of jogging, right? It might be a great way to get sunlight in the morning and wake up, and it could be a great way to de-stress, but there are much more efficient ways of building muscle mass or dropping pounds. So switch it up, try something else, try weightlifting, body weight exercises, HIIT, yoga, whatever. Try something that feels good to you, that has some good feedback. It's great if you enjoy the process of doing it. That's like one of the best things. But also if it gets you some result. So for example, if you actually feel more alert later in the day, or have more energy later in the day, if you feel sometimes after a good workout, for example, I'm actually less hungry, like I don't have food cravings, I'm less likely to snack. That's a positive result that I can get. It'll depend on your goals and what you're looking for, but try different methods, different habits, and do it for, usually even just a week is often enough to tell certainly if you enjoy something, and then 2, maybe start seeing some results. In my case, for exercise particularly, for instance, I usually see like exercise getting significantly easier the 3rd time I try it in the same week. If I try something 3 times in a week at least, like of exercise, I usually find it's easier. It's somewhat hard the first time. The second time I might be still sore or whatever, and the 3rd time I start noticing that, like, okay, my body's starting to adjust to this. It gets easier, and I'll start seeing the results more in earnest. So particularly for the most effective habits, maybe there are other habits that might take longer to see a difference, but for the most effective habits, I find 3 days to a week is often enough time to get a sense of whether they are going to give me results. And so a lot of times when people feel like I don't have enough discipline because I can't stick with a habit, it's just a habit that doesn't give them a lot, right? They're exercising because they feel like they should, but they don't like the exercise. It's not getting them results. And so the brain's just trying to help them conserve energy by getting them to quit. And if they tried a different form of exercise, something where they enjoy the process, something where they're getting better results, then the habit becomes instinctively easier to stick with. So I used to think, for example, that I was bad at keeping habits until I did a lot of research on how to reduce allergies with habits. And that started out as yoga, which helped drain my sinuses and clear out my allergies for a little bit. And then it commuted to a breathing exercise I found even more powerful in both helping me with allergies and helping me stay alert during the day. Does that mean I do my breathing exercises absolutely every single day? No, I often actually take a break on weekends, etc. Take it a little easier. But on weekdays, especially if I don't do it, I miss it. I feel stuffier and I feel less alert. And so the fact that I get results keeps me coming back to this habit, so that there really isn't a week where I do my breathing exercises less than like 5 times, for example. Just naturally, it doesn't require a lot of discipline. It just like I notice I feel better almost right away doing my breathing exercises. I notice I'm a lot less tired in the early afternoon when I tend to have my normal slump. So between those two things, it's easy to keep the habit. It doesn't require a lot of discipline. So discipline is usually not the solution. It's just a short-term solution for starting up habits. And even then, if you're breaking your habit down small enough, you shouldn't require a lot of discipline. So backing this up, plan for obstacles and adjust, right? It's okay if there's an outside obstacle that interrupts your habit. Just plan for that next week and adjust. 2, if you find you're still having a hard time getting started and it's not an external obstacle, break down your habit into something smaller so it doesn't require a lot of discipline. And then 3, if you find that you can start habits and do them for a little while, but then you peter off, probably what you need to do is experiment through several different habits. Now, there's one more thing. If you absolutely have to implement a particular habit, maybe it's a requirement that comes from outside, or maybe you don't have a lot of other viable alternatives. One solution you can use in this last case, instead of swapping out an entirely new habit, you can swap out different aspects of the habit. You can swap out a different cue. You can use external rewards, etc., to kind of help sweeten the deal. But another very powerful tool is paying attention, or switching what you're paying attention to, switching what feedback you're paying attention to. So actually, in the case of dropping a bad habit, for example, with smokers, they had them be mindful of the actual taste of the cigarette, and that's often really actually kind of gross. And so that they found that just paying attention to that feedback rather than the feedback of has your craving to put something in your mouth subsided or something, right, like that. If you switch your attention from that feedback to how does this taste, what is the sensory experience of smoking, which is usually not great, that switch from, in this case, a positive source of feedback to a negative feedback help them not do the habit. But the same thing can work in reverse. If there's something that you really hate, chances are you're paying attention to something. So if exercise, you're paying attention to how sore you're feeling, right? Versus that when you come out of the gym, if you've done, exercise, lift weights, looking at your muscles, and they're usually, since they've been tense, they're usually a little swole, right? That's the key term, get swole. And so, paying attention to how you just look a little bit more fit when your muscles are just, tense and in shape from exercise, right? You look a little bit better. That could be a good thing. Or it could be, your mental talk around a cue can also help you in this last segment. And so, for instance, if you come out of the gym feeling sore or tired and saying like, wow, that was a lot of energy, I feel really sore, you can change your mental talk to, wow, I put a lot of effort into this. That's awesome. I'm committed, right? Way to go. Cheer yourself on and create a positive mental feedback for yourself. Now, my go-to is still, if at all possible, try and find a habit that is more rewarding, because oftentimes it can be just self-flagellating to try and do something that isn't working for you. But if you absolutely must do a habit, or you have a habit that's working all right and you want it to work even better, you can tweak it by some of these means, by having a different cue, by having a different reward, and by paying attention to what kind of feedback, or switching which feedback you're paying attention to. So I hope this is helpful. How are you going to use this as an entrepreneur? Well, if you have a hard time getting started in the morning, swap out whatever is your first morning routine. For me, it's these videos, which is kind of helpful because at a certain time, I am accountable for sitting down and doing these videos. And that makes sure that, even though I'm working at home, even if there's nobody else in the house to know whether or not I'm starting my workday on time, I'm actually committed to doing it. So that's been, one example. But there's other rituals you can have, starting the morning with a soothing cup of herbal tea and some calming music, or, starting with some awesome rock music to get you ramped up, or whatever it is. Change out your getting started routine, or if there's a task that you don't like doing, breaking it down into smaller chunks, schedule it for a particular time and schedule a reward afterwards, etc. All sorts of different ways you can take a look at where you're stuck in your work, where you have a hard time working, and then maybe troubleshoot what habit you're doing around that. So I would love to hear, if this has been helpful, what things you're struggling with, what habits have been working for you. Lay that in the comments down below. If this has been helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel. What we do here, occasionally we have these tips, but also we're following the process of working with my wife Meg, and in her business, and how to develop a repeatable customer acquisition model. And specifically for someone who's not a marketer, who has a hard time marketing. And so if you find yourself as a solopreneur or small business that's that is working on new ways of acquiring customers, or you feel awkward marketing yourself, then go ahead and subscribe. Watch us at 8 a.m. Central, and you'll see the real process, not a theoretical process, but like warts and all, the real process of learning to market. So I hope to see you in future mornings, and until next time, make big changes one small habit at a time.